So, for those of you who may
Half of
not
y'all,
remember,
half
Brittney
of y'all,
Griner
half of
was
y'all.
detained in Russia on February 17th for possession of cannabis oil in her luggage. On August 4th, she was sentenced to 9 years in prison. July 27th, the Biden administration offered a prisoner swap with Russia to secure the release of both Griner and American prisoner Paul Whelan. So then, December 28th, 2018, Paul Whelan was arrested in Moscow under suspicion of espionage, bigger charge than, the cannabis oil. On December 8th, she was released in a one-for-one trade prisoner swap for Viktor Bout. Bout served in the Russian military until its dissolution in 1991, and he was an arms dealer, bringing weapons to Africa, Afghanistan, Hezbollah. So,
Horrible.
Griner for Boot, no Whelan. Do you think that this is a good trade?
Uh, let's start with Liz. What do you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And all of the people who are against this would not have had anything to say if Brittney Griner was the one who was still in the Russian jail and we had exchanged Paul Whelan for Boot. Like there are a lot of underlying issues going on here, whether it be race, whether it be gender, whether it be gender identity. Like it pisses me off that we are deciding in this instance who is the better
More
American,
valuable.
who is more patriotic, who is more worthy. And, a lot of these people who've been speaking out because they take issue with the fact that, Brittany Griner at one point, her right as an American citizen with free speech spoke out against the national anthem and the flag. That is her right. What she didn't do was get court martialed by the U.S. Marines and convicted of larceny like Paul Whelan. So, if we're going to tell it, we got to tell it all. Like, do I want Paul Whelan to still be in prison in Russia? Absolutely not. But let's not portray him as, some innocent here and portray Brittany Griner as the demon because that's not what we're dealing with. Biden did the best that he could with what he had. And for anyone to say that, okay, well, we should have just left her there, that's BS. That's complete BS. And
Yeah.
that's not very patriotic of you. That's
And,
not very patriotic of you.
and we have to remember that Paul Whelan was actually accused of espionage. And we don't know if that's true or not because the U.S. denies it. But if it was a spy, if he was a spy, it makes sense that
to the Russians, he is a spy, and it's amazing that they didn't execute him.
Right.
Espionage is a very serious charge. It's a very serious charge.
So it's not surprising that he would be treated differently to me. That
exactly.
he would be right.
No.
And so
I feel as if they didn't, like Biden said, it was, I don't know if he used the term unexpected, but it was like a one-to-one trade, but it wasn't originally like that. The deal was for both of them. So I feel like for people to
that's what he asked for.
Yeah,
that was as part of negotiations. That's what he wanted to get, but Russia was like, "Oh no."
That's why it's called a negotiation. Okay. Like all these people speaking out, talking about Biden didn't do this. But Biden doesn't have the key to the jail cell.
Mm-hmm.
He has to negotiate with the Russian government over this. And let me ask you folks, hopefully y'all are listening, what did Trump do? Because Paul Whelan was in the Russian jail for 2 years while Trump was in office and nothing happened. And Paul Whelan is a Trump supporter, is a Trump advocate. Supposedly, members of his family wrote to Trump asking for help, and he said no. Like, let's not put this all on Joe Biden and say Joe Biden turned against democracy and the American people for Brittney Griner. That's not what happened here.
Johnny, do you have more to say? Go ahead.
I think it was just crazy to think that people are being like traded and swapped off like they're just players on a chessboard. It's weird that we're like having this.
But they are.
But politically, this has been done between the Russia and U.S. for decades.
Oh, yeah.
So, and that's it. I'm happy that Brittney is out and she's with her family. But when I look at it from a political and military asset value, I don't know that it was a fair trade. That being said, it's one person for one person. People get their lives back. But Bout was a true badass, who disrupted politics, who disrupted, who basically enabled war, who profiteered. Not
but they weren't going to
on the
offer
same
up
level.
a common thief. They
And
weren't
then,
going to offer up a common thief.
right.
Like, of
And you got to
course they were
consider,
going to, offer somebody like him.
Bout only had a few years left in prison anyway, because they only were able to convict him for, I forget what it was. They were only able to convict him for a short sentence because they couldn't find the evidence beyond that. And then, and so he was almost done with his prison sentence anyway, and he was going to get out and be able to be free. So at that point, Brittney Griner, 10 years versus Paul Whelan, I think he might have had like a couple of years left in his sentence or whatever it was.
He was get out in 2006. I think he got 16 years. He'd been in
I think that's what it was, 16 or 18 years.
Okay, so
which again, for espionage, that's a gift. That's a gift.
Because he unfortunately they couldn't really get him on the serious problem, so he was going to go free. So it was a reasonable exchange, I think. It's unfortunate that it was someone like him, but what is this guy going to do anyway when he gets out there? He's not going to be able to get back into the arms dealing business anyway. He probably has lost all his contacts and everything. But I don't know. I agree. Griner's back. It's unfortunate that she made the mistake of not following the rules and becoming a pawn in this game between the U.S. and Russia. But I think it was a good choice.
And lest we forget, this isn't the first swap of the year.
Good point.
Trevor Reed was swapped earlier this year. Another American who was in a Russian jail. The Biden administration got him out earlier this year. So the Biden administration, there are several American citizens who are in Russian jails at this time. But think about the Biden administration. Within a year, they've already gotten out 2. How many did Trump get out in his 4 years?
Yep.
0.
Yeah.
0.
All right, let's get to these comments online. Kevin Thaxton, it's up to the Russians to agree to the terms. No authoritarian government would give up a spy. Totally agree.
Thank you.
Let's see. Daria Winter said, not accused, but convicted. Biden did not request. Let's see. Jacqueline Robinson, Whelan's family is still salty about IQ 45's inaction and have been dragging him for days. Oh, really?
Oh, wow.
I didn't hear that. Robin Johnson, a military person was released earlier, so it isn't that USA has left military behind.
Thank you. It's and I think a lot of people don't understand how serious an espionage charge is. People have been watching way too many TV movies and Mission Impossible and all that stuff. It's very serious.
Especially depending on what the spy did.
The spy did and which country? If this had been Korea, North Korea,
he'd be dead.
Killed.
Yep.
100%.
Jacqueline Robinson, one last thing. The Whelan family graciously said that this was a good trade and they would admonish the armchair geopolitical experts to check themselves. White right wingers, wow, that's difficult, have really showed their asses this past week and exposed the Mayfair, the racist they are.
Yeah, it's sad. But like Rob said, I'm happy. She was in jail for 9 months over a vaping from the country who, was banned from the Olympics, who had to use couldn't use their own flag, had to use a different name for the Olympics because they are premier dopers. But I'm glad that she's home, especially in time for the holidays. And hopefully, again, I don't want Paul Whelan to be there.
Yeah.
So hopefully, something can happen within the, coming months.
Agreed.
But let's stop all of this BS and, trying to identify who's the better American. That's horrible.
Yep.
That's horrible. And that's not patriotic.
Yep.
It's not.
All right. Is this truth, lies, or shenanigans?
Shenanigans. A little bit of...
It's some truth.
Got some truth going on. I think Brittney Griner was a good choice. Unfortunately, had to make a choice, but I think it was the choice. Plus, Brittney Griner can advocate for Paul Whelan too. That's something to think about. She has,
and her wife has been. Her wife, they have been.
Yeah,
since her release.
I think she committed to doing it as well, to advocating for him. So, all right.
It brings, very lastly, it brings about another question about, are U.S. athletes want to continue to play in Russia?
Mhm.
That's another
Yeah, that's a good question because I know after watching Griner, there's no way I would go back.